Let us deal with some basic concepts. We are dealing with certain basic concepts in economics. You picture the economist with a toolbox. There are several tools, and the tools are used according to the problem and according to the situation. And these concepts come in handy when you are dealing with problems. So let us start with concepts like statics. Statics does not mean stationary. A lot of analysis of the type of statics is made use of. From one position, certain forces act and you move away from that position, then you come back to that position. It is all static analysis. Ordinary equilibrium analysis, which is used in microeconomics a lot, it is static analysis. Does not mean stationary, but moving, coming back, that kind of analysis, very often statics. But comparative statics would mean that you are comparing equilibrium situations. There is one equilibrium situation, from there you move on to another equilibrium situation. The equilibrium situations are compared, but not the time path. The transition, the variables, how they move from one position to another, it is not analyzed in comparative statics. In dynamics, it is altogether a new story. The transition is analyzed. From one, the transition path itself is analyzed. In fact, in a diagram, if you are having dynamic analysis, in the horizontal axis, you have time period. From one time period to another, how do you move? That is analyzed in dynamics. A lot of these are made use of in economics. Economics, you find several economists are specialist tool makers. They make all these kind, they make use of many tools. They themselves make tools. For example, Keynes, J.M. Keynes is very famous as a tool maker who made tools like the consumption function or marginal efficiency of capital, etc. And these there are tool users. Tools are being made use of very much. So in economics, you find the tool makers and the tool users and the whole array of others who are practicing the discipline and using these analytical tools. Let us think of these major divisions in economics, like microeconomics and macroeconomics. Microeconomics would mean you are starting from, or you are looking at the economy from the individual decision maker. For example, the consumer, the producer, the government. The consumer is maximizing satisfaction. You are making the consumer eat apples one after the other. When does he stop eating apples? When does he get maximum satisfaction? Or you move on to the producer. What is the price at which he maximizes his profit? What is the quantity? What is the price quantity situation at which he is maximizing his profit? These things are analyzed in microeconomics. But in macroeconomics, you are having a bird's eye view of the whole economy. You talk of the gross domestic product. You talk of the national income. You talk of unemployment rate. You talk of inflation. Is there a core inflation or is there other types of inflation? What are the problems there? What are the supply situations? What are the demand situations? In generally, you are looking at the you talk of supply and demand. There comes the stories often told, actually to denigrate the economist. They say you just have to make a parrot to learn supply and demand in answer to all the questions that are asked. For example, you are talking about the modern problems of rising prices, and then you ask the parent, what is the problem? Will say supply. Can translate it as there are supply shocks. You talk of supply shocks now, and the parent will say supply. And you talk of demand escalation. There is a great rise in demand, and the parent will say demand. So you require just supply and demand, whatever the problem is. Well, it is just a story to denigrate the economics. There is one kernel of truth in that, because essentially, when you come right down to almost all the problems fall back into these two categories of supply shocks or demand escalations. These you find always in economics. You are dealing with equations in economics. There are functional equations and identity equations. When you are explaining, when you are thinking of one variable as a function of another, you are saying that this depends on the other. For example, price is considered as an independent variable. There is price fluctuation. And then in response, the quantity demanded will change. Price rises and the quantity demanded falls back. Price falls and quantity demanded will increase. And thus comes our demand curve. Celebrated demand curve will come. It is a functional equation. So there are large number of functional equations. In fact, it is the functional equations that are very important because they analyze what changes are there, what are the changes that are taking place, and what are the factors behind all this. It is analyzed in functional equations. In identity equations, what you find is a mere explanation. It is a truism, just a one-liner. In one line, you say, this is it. For example, income is equal to expenditure. Who doesn't know it? If you are taking up one whole economy, total income will be equal to total expenditure. There's nothing more to say about it. Or when you come more into economics, you talk of MV is equal to PT. Money supply is equal to price into volume of trade. There are such equations. They are explanatory. They have their place, but not as important as the functional equations. Now we come to equilibrium. Equilibrium is very important in economics. You talk of equilibrium always. Equilibrium is a state of rest. You analyze equilibrium. You are dealing with large number of forces in economics. And these forces act and react, and there's a state of rest, a state of balance. And this state of balance is disturbed. And then you come back to the original position. So there are two ways of analyzing equilibrium. One is partial equilibrium. You analyze the equilibrium from the point of view of the consumer, from or that of the monopolist. Typically, you find examples of partial equilibrium in determining of price and quantity. The monopolist or the monopolistic competitor or the perfect competitive producer, all of them, how they arrive at short period equilibrium, how it is disturbed, how there is long period equilibrium. There's a lot of it in economics. And the ustad of that is Marshall. Such number of examples of partial equilibrium analysis is found in Alfred Marshall with his representative firm, his monopolistic competition analysis. You find a large number of examples for partial equilibrium. But when you look at the economy in general, you know that all variables are changing. In economics, we use a particular phrase, ceteris paribus. Other things remain the same. You insist that other things are remaining equal, and you analyze our variables in a sort of fenced area, and you are keeping apart all the other variables. Other things remaining the same. That is required in partial equilibrium analysis. But in general equilibrium, Everything is analyzed, everything moves. There's a state of flux. All variables are moving. Actually, it's a very difficult thing to analyze, and there are, it is associated with certain famous names like at a walrus. Then there is the ISLMEQ, the Patin-Gills generally. Of course, all the variables are moving. It has it has its own rules and it has its own type of analysis. Okay, moving on, you come to concepts like positive economics and normative economics. In textbook economics, you always find statements like positive economics is about what is, and normative economics is about what ought to be. When you come right down to it, what is it? Positive economics explains the actual position of the actual state of affairs, actual position, without being judgmental. You say the income distribution in a country, it is asymmetric. You do not say, you do not bring in problems of poverty and illiteracy and slum dwelling, etc. When you bring in words like that, there is a sort of bringing through the back door judgmental things. A dark scene is created. No, it is not. You can take away even that phrase and you can say the income distribution is asymmetric. That is the kind of positive economics that you are talking about. You are analyzing things, you are using equations, you are saying this is it. But in normative economics, you are saying you are indulging in value judgments. You say this is correct, this ought to be the case, and these are the things that can be done. Now, this problem has to be corrected. It can be corrected in this way. You are indulging in all kinds of value judgments. You say this is bad, this is good, how it can be corrected, all these sort of things. You say in case of normative methodology. If you come to methodology, you talk of deductive methodology. Deductive methodology. Deductive, you used to talk of logically, analytically, how you come to certain conclusions. Now, you start with certain assumptions. Logically, you analyze the assumptions. The assumptions need not be very correct, but logically, there should be consistency. And consistently, you derive from the assumptions certain conclusions. Now, this deductive method has been made use of by Ricardo a lot. In fact, David Ricardo is famous for starting every problem by saying, let us suppose. And very logically, very correctly, he would come to certain conclusions. That is analytical method. We talk of analytical method now, deductive method. It's logical. And from assumptions, you come to certain conclusions. The deductive method is more like uh, empirical or statistical methods. Statistically, you analyze. Empirical analysis or statistical analysis all come under, all have been similar to deductive method. These are the kinds of methodology that are made use of very often. Economics. Methodology is very important. Now we come to certain review questions which I shall read out. And you would like to uh, find out the answers for yourself. Microeconomic theory studies how a free enterprise economy determines the price of goods, the price of services, the price of economic resources, all of them. We haven't actually explained what the free enterprise economy is, but of course, the laissez-faire economy, free enterprise economy, of course, it's assumed that we know it. A function refers to A, the demand for a commodity, the supply of a commodity. C, the demand and supply of a commodity, service, resources. D, the relationship between dependent variables. And one or more independent variables. The market equilibrium for a commodity is determined by the market demand for the commodity, B, the market supply of the commodity, C, the balancing of the forces of demand and supply for commodity, or D, any of the above. Which of the following is incorrect? Microeconomics is concerned primarily with the problem of what, how, and for whom to produce. Microeconomics is concerned primarily with the economic behavior of individual decision-making units when applicable. C. Microeconomics is concerned primarily with the time, path, and process by which one equilibrium position evolves into another. D. Microeconomics is concerned primarily with comparative statistics rather than dynamics. Which of the following statements is most closely associated with general equilibrium analysis? A. Everything depends on everything else. B. Ceteris paribus. C. The equilibrium price of a good or service depends on the balancing of the forces of demand and supply for that good or service. D. The equilibrium price of a factor depends on the balancing of the forces of demand and supply for the factor.